All right, guys, in this video, we're going to talk about how to pick your first niche for rank and rent digital real estate. And I'll start by saying this, guys, if you do this wrong, if you do this incorrectly, if you go into the wrong niche or the wrong industry, you are literally starting with a losing hand. It is going to be very, very difficult. And in the same breath, I'll tell you that no matter what industry you choose, if you do this correctly, you will generate some leads to some extent. I've done this in some very interesting and weird niches. I've done this in home security. We've tried this with solar. We've tried this with assisted living, golf lessons, just some really weird stuff. And guess what? In all of those cases that I just gave you, we generated leads. However, I will tell you that some of those industries generated far more than others. And those compared to some of your tried and true, your concrete, your tree service, your spray foam, the things I talk about every single day, it's almost not even something you can compare because you get such a far better return with specific niches. So I want to talk about the criteria. And if you're brand new to this model, you just discovered it, you heard about me on a podcast, or you read an article on this magazine or that, whatever, and you're like, what is digital real estate? Who is this guy? What is digital landlord? Guys, the first thing you need to figure out is what industry are you going into? And I'll say this, when I started, I received some advice that I feel like was not the greatest. The advice was, the riches are in the niches. You got to find the crazy niche. You got to find that obscure, very weird one that no one's thought of, and then you can go vertical, and then you own it. And yes, that is true. If you find some weird little niche that nobody knows about, you as long as you move quickly, you have a great advantage. But guess what, guys? I did that, and I tested, and I tried all these different niches. I spent all this money just to find out this didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't work. And finally, in 2019, the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I said, why don't I go into the industries that are already proven? Why don't I go into the niches that people that are doing this model are having success in? And why don't I focus instead my efforts on the city? What constitutes a good city? What is the population? Which, by the way, I don't care much about population, but I'll talk about that in other videos. What kind of search volume do you need? What kind of climate and seasonality? All these different things. And I started focusing on the city. And I kind of changed my mentality of, I got to find this really weird niche to, why don't I try to find really weird cities with tried and true niches? Because guys, there's two components to this. You have the city and then you have the niche, right? So if you can go into a niche that's already tried and true, you're literally eliminating half of the equation, and all you have to do is focus on the city. That's why I'm so bullish. So I'm always talking about going into tried and true niches. But what I want to do in this video is I want to give you guys some criteria that I personally use when I'm looking at a niche, okay? And I'm also not telling you that you have to go into concrete, tree service, spray foam, duct cleaning, all the ones that I talk about. You don't have to do that. I'm just telling you that when there's a tried and true niche, it eliminates half the equation, okay? So here are my criteria when I'm picking a niche, or I'm looking at and assessing a new niche, which, by the way, I found one today because it's being done at my house. And I'm like, I've never thought about that. And I actually Googled this company. So I've got something I'm going to be sharing on another video. But these are the criteria that I look at, okay? Number one is it has to be high ticket. And when I say high ticket, it has to be, $1,500, $2,000 minimum up to probably $20,000. Okay, that's and why? Why does it need to be high ticket? Well, if it's high ticket and it has decent margins, that means the business owner makes more per job, which means he can afford / justify paying me more, right? The only exception to this is if it's very, 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 very high margin. Duct cleaning, for example, is not a super high ticket. It's like $500 to $1,000 to clean ducts. However, the margins are like 90% because the only thing that you have is literally your time, right? So it works. It's not my favorite niche, but it works because of that, okay? But typically I want to make sure it's $1,500, $2,000 up to $20,000. And anything above that, it also gets a little too competitive because if you're making too much, let's say solar, right? A solar contract is worth so much money to these companies that it's very, very, very competitive. People are spending huge budgets because they have the money to justify, okay? Has to be high ticket. Number two, there needs to be good search volume. This can't be a niche where there's only a few people per city that are searching it. It's high ticket, but there's only this like select few group of people that are actually going to need the service. It needs to be something that people regularly search. Okay, so it has to have good search volume. Number three, it needs to be non-branded. If you're seeing billboards all over town for this specific service, Probably not good. You know what you see a lot of billboards of? Roofing. You know what you see a lot of billboards of? Solar. These are not niches that I like because they are highly branded. And so think about it, guys. If you're building an unbranded website and somebody lands on your website in a niche like that, you're going to have really bad conversion. So I want to make sure that it's non-branded. Okay. Number 4, I want to make sure this is something that we would call phone driven. It's not a brick and mortar, right? It's not something that you go and use. Hey, let's go and shop for XYZ thing, right? Let's go look at carpet. That's something you actually go into a store to do a lot of times. Concrete, you don't just take a Saturday and go shop concrete companies because they don't have storefronts, right? And so these phone driven businesses, excuse me, or these non brick and mortar businesses always work the best. That's another criteria. And then number 5 is something I try my best to look at. It's not ever going to be perfect, but I want to make sure that this isn't a niche that's extremely seasonal. Okay, let's take snow removal. Snow removal is fantastic during the winter, when it's cold, when it's snowing. But when it's not, it is literally dead. Here's a weird niche that I tried: Christmas lights, right? Christmas light installation. This is where I live. I don't know if some of you guys have this happening in your neighborhoods. People are going and installing these pretty high-end lights that you can change colors and have your Halloween colors, have your Christmas, all these different things. And I'm like, that could be interesting. So I built a site, got it ranked. It didn't take that long because it's not super competitive. But guess what? The phone only rang in November. It only rang in November, October, and a little bit of October, November, and the first part of December. That's it. And the rest of the 9 months, it didn't work. So guys, it has to be as non-seasonal as possible. These are my criteria for picking a niche. Again, my preference and my suggestion to you, if you're brand new, I would go into something that's tried and true so that you don't have to go and say, hey, is this going to fit the criteria of the niche? And I got to go make sure the city's right. You pick a niche that's already tried and true. You go into these boring niches and you focus your efforts on the city. That's my advice for picking your first niche with digital real estate.